Ambassador Han stood at the viewing window of the council station. His 4 eyes blinked slowly as he watched the small blue planet below. Earth, the of the species to make contact with the Galactic Council. The ambassador was old. He had served the council for 300 years. He had seen many species join the galactic community. Some were peaceful traders, some were scholars, a few were warriors. But in all his years, Han had never felt this strange feeling in his chest. It was something like fear, and he did not understand why. The humans had made first contact only 6 months ago. A human exploration ship had met a trading vessel near the outer rim. The meeting was peaceful. The humans were friendly. They smiled a lot. They talked about peace and cooperation. They seemed eager to learn about the galaxy. So why did Han feel so uneasy? The door behind him opened. Council member N entered the room. They was tall and thin, with silver skin that reflected the light of distant stars. Her 3-fingered hands were folded in front of her. "The human delegation has arrived," she said. "They brought their military representative as we requested." Han turned from the window. "Good. I want to understand their defense capabilities. Every species that joins the council must share this information." "Of course," N said, but her voice carried a strange tone. "Ambassador, I should warn you, the humans. Their soldiers are not what I expected." "What do you mean?" N's silver skin rippled, a sign of discomfort among her kind. "You will see." They walked together through the curved hallways of the council station. The station was massive. It held representatives from 47 species. It was a place of diplomacy and trade, of law and order. Weapons were forbidden here except for the station's own security force. The meeting room was large and round. A circular table sat in the center. Around it, several council members had already taken their seats. Han saw Representative K of the Collective. He saw Elder Al of the. He saw Commander of the Protectorate. And at one end of the table sat the human delegation. There were 3 of them. 2 wore simple clothing. They had data pads in front of them and pleasant expressions on their faces. These were diplomats, politicians. They looked harmless. But the 3rd human was different. He sat slightly apart from the others. He wore a uniform of dark green and brown. His face was calm, almost bored. His eyes moved slowly around the room, looking at each council member in turn. And when those eyes met Han's, the ambassador felt a chill run through his body. "Welcome, Ambassador Han," said the female human diplomat. She stood and gave a small bow. "I am Sarah, Senior Diplomatic Representative of Earth. This is my colleague, and this is Sergeant Major Thomas Reed of the United Earth Defense Force." The soldier did not stand. He simply nodded once. Han took his seat across from the humans. He forced his voice to remain steady. "Thank you for coming. As you know, the Council requires all member species to share basic information about their military capabilities. This is for mutual defense and cooperation." Sarah smiled. "Of course, we're happy to share. Sergeant Major Reed is here to answer any questions about our military structure." Han looked at the soldier. "Very well, please tell us about your military forces. How large is your army? What is its structure?" Reed spoke for the first time. His voice was low and rough, like stones grinding together. "The United Earth Defense Force consists of approximately 12 million active soldiers. We have ground forces, naval forces, air forces, and space forces. Each branch has its own command structure, but they all work together under a unified leadership." Elder Al leaned forward. There was ancient with wrinkled blue skin and clouded eyes, but his mind was still sharp. 12 million. That seems like a large number for a single planet. "Earth has a population of 11 billion, Reed said. 12 million is actually a small percentage. Commander made a sound of surprise. There was a warrior species. They respected military strength. How are these soldiers trained? How long does it take to prepare a soldier for combat? Basic training takes about 14 weeks, Reed said. After that, soldiers receive specialized training depending on their assignment. Infantry, armor, artillery, medical, communications, intelligence. Each specialty requires additional training time. 14 weeks sounded confused. That is very fast. Our warriors train for 5 years before they are considered ready for battle. Reed showed no emotion. 14 weeks gives them the basics. They continue training throughout their entire career. A soldier never stops learning. Hand studied the human carefully. There was something about the way he sat, something about the way his eyes never stopped moving. The ambassador had seen predators before. He had met species that hunted and killed to survive. But this human was different. He was not a predator that killed for food. He was something else entirely. "Tell me, Sergeant Major," Hand said slowly. "You are a regular soldier, yes, not a special unit or elite force." Reed's lips twitched. It might have been a smile. "I am regular infantry, ground forces, nothing special." "Nothing special," N repeated quietly. Her silver skin rippled again. "You said you have specialized soldiers," Elder Al said. "What did you call them? Special forces. What makes them different from regular soldiers like yourself?" Sarah shifted in her seat. She looked uncomfortable. "Perhaps we should discuss that another time. The sergeant major is here to explain our standard military." "It's fine," Reed interrupted. He looked at the council members. His eyes were calm, patient. "Regular soldiers like me are trained to fight. We learn to use weapons, to follow orders, to work as a team. We can operate in different environments. We can adapt to different situations. We are trained to survive." He paused. "Special forces are trained to do things that regular soldiers cannot do. They operate behind enemy lines. They complete missions that are considered impossible. They are trained to endure pain that would break normal soldiers. They are trained to keep fighting when their bodies should have stopped working." The room was silent. Commander Scales had changed color. They were now a pale gray. This was a sign of deep unease. "You say regular soldiers can adapt to different environments. What do you mean?" "Humans can fight in extreme heat or extreme cold," Reed said. "We can fight in jungles, deserts, mountains, or swamps. We can fight underwater. We can fight in space. We can go without food for weeks if necessary. We can go without sleep for days and still function." "That is impossible," Kay said. The representative was shaking. His species was known for their need for strict routines. They required exactly 8 hours of sleep every day or their bodies would shut down. No species can survive without sleep for days. "Humans can," Reed said simply. "It is not pleasant, it causes damage over time, but we can do it." Hand's hands were trembling. He gripped the edge of the table to hide it. "Sergeant Major, you say that you are a regular soldier, a normal soldier. You are not part of these special forces." "No, Ambassador. I am just regular infantry." "And how long have you served?" 23 years. "In that time, have you seen combat?" Reed was quiet for a moment. "I have fought in 7 different conflicts. I have served in 42 combat operations. I have been wounded 11 times. Elder Al made a choking sound. 11 times wounded, and you are still able to serve. "Humans heal," Reed said. "Some wounds leave scars. Some cause permanent damage, but we can repair much of what is broken, and even with injuries we can continue to fight." Commander stood suddenly. His chair scraped against the floor. "I must be honest with you humans. Your species is concerning. They are warriors. We have fought for thousands of years. But what you describe is beyond what we thought possible." Sarah raised her hands in a calming gesture. "Please understand, we come in peace. Earth has no desire for conflict with the Council. We want to be friends and partners." "I believe you," said. His voice was strained. "That is what concerns me. You speak of peace while bringing a soldier who describes warfare beyond our understanding. What would you be like if you wanted war? The room fell silent again. Han finally spoke. Sergeant Major Reed, I would like you to tell us about a battle you participated in, a recent one. Can you describe what happened? Reed thought for a moment. 3 years ago, I was part of a force sent to remove a rebel group from a mountain region. The rebels had taken over several mining facilities. They had hostages. They had fortified positions in the mountains. How many soldiers were in your force? Han asked. 400. And how many rebels? Intelligence estimated around 2,000. Commander hissed. You were outnumbered 5-1. That is a losing situation. We won, Reed said. The operation took 11 days. We moved through the mountains at night to avoid detection. We survived on minimal supplies. We climbed terrain that was considered impassable. On the final day, we attacked from 3 directions at once. The rebels were not prepared for an assault from the mountain peaks above them. How many of your soldiers were lost? Elder Al asked. 12 killed, 37 wounded. The council members looked at each other. Their faces showed shock and disbelief. You defeated 2,000 enemies while being outnumbered 5-1, Kay said slowly. You lost only 12 soldiers, and you say this is normal. This is what regular soldiers do. It was a successful operation, Reed said. We had good intelligence, good leadership, and good soldiers. Nothing special. Nothing special, N repeated again. Her voice was barely a whisper. Ambassador Han leaned back in his chair. His 4 eyes studied the human soldier. 23 years of service, 11 wounds, 7 conflicts, and he called himself nothing special. Sergeant Major, Han said carefully, if you are a regular soldier and you can do these things, what can your special forces do? Reed looked at him. For a moment, something flickered in those calm eyes, something that made Han's blood run cold. With respect, Ambassador, Reed said quietly, you do not want to know. The meeting ended shortly after that. The council members filed out in silence. No one spoke. No one looked at each other. They all needed time to think about what they had heard. Han remained in the meeting room. He stood at the window looking out at the stars. N stayed with him. Ambassador, she said softly, what do we do? Han was silent for a long moment. We welcome them, he finally said. We make them our friends. We do everything in our power to ensure that humanity never becomes our enemy. And if we fail? The ambassador closed his 4 eyes. He remembered the look in Reed's eyes, the calm, patient look of a predator who knew he was the most dangerous thing in the room. If we fail, Han said, then we pray that they send only their regular soldiers. In the weeks that followed, the council gathered more information about humanity. They sent observers to Earth. They studied human history. They read about human wars. And what they learned made them afraid. Humans had been fighting since the beginning of their civilization. They had created weapons of terrible power. They had killed each other by the millions in conflicts over land, resources, religion, and ideas. They had developed new ways to wage war with terrifying creativity. But what scared the council most was not the weapons. It was not the death counts. It was not even the creativity. It was the recovery. After every war, humans rebuilt. After every disaster, they came back stronger. They lost millions of their own kind, and they mourned, and they healed, and they moved forward. They did not give up. They did not surrender to despair. They endured. Ambassador Han read report after report. He learned about human resistance movements during occupations. He learned about soldiers who fought until their last breath. He learned about medical advances that allowed humans to survive wounds that would kill any other species. And then he read about their special forces. He learned about soldiers who could survive in any environment on their planet. Soldiers who could operate alone for months behind enemy lines. Soldiers who were trained to resist torture, to escape from any prison, to complete missions that were considered suicide. He learned about underwater soldiers who could swim for hours in freezing water. He learned about mountain soldiers who could climb the highest peaks while carrying heavy equipment. He learned about soldiers who jumped from aircraft high in the sky and landed silently in enemy territory. And he learned that these special soldiers were considered exceptional even by human standards. If Sergeant Major Reed was a regular soldier, and he could do the things he described. If regular human soldiers could defeat enemies 5 times their number. If regular human soldiers could survive wounds that would kill other species. Then what could the Special Forces do? Han closed the reports. He sat alone in his office for a long time. Outside his window, the stars burned quietly in the endless dark. Humanity would join the Council. There was no question about that. They were too powerful to refuse, too dangerous to offend. The Council would welcome them with open arms and smiling faces. And Han would make sure that the galaxy stayed on humanity's good side. Because the alternative was unthinkable. The humans called them Special Forces. They said the name with pride, with respect, with a hint of fear in their own voices. And if humanity's regular soldiers could make the Council tremble, then the Special Forces were something out of nightmares. Ambassador Han looked at the stars and made a silent promise. He would do everything in his power to keep peace with humanity. He would make sure the Council never gave them a reason to fight. Because he had seen a regular human soldier. He had looked into those calm, patient eyes. He had heard the quiet confidence in that rough voice. And he knew that what he had seen was only a glimpse. Only a small glimpse of what humanity could do. The real terror was yet to come. 6 months had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Council. In that time, the humans had proven themselves to be excellent partners. They were fair in trade. They were curious about other cultures. They made friends easily. But the Council never forgot what they had learned about human soldiers. Ambassador Han had shared his concerns with the other Council members. They had read the reports about human warfare. They had studied human history. And they had all agreed on one thing: humanity must never become an enemy. So when the crisis began in the system, the Council saw it as an opportunity to watch human soldiers in real combat, an opportunity to understand what they were truly capable of. The system was on the outer edge of Council space. It contained 3 habitable worlds. 2 were mining colonies. The third was a farming world that supplied food to a dozen nearby systems. For years, the system had been plagued by raiders, pirates who attacked supply ships, slavers who kidnapped workers from remote settlements, criminal organizations that had grown powerful enough to challenge local security forces. The Council had tried to solve the problem many times. They had sent warriors. They had sent peacekeepers. They had even asked them to mediate with the criminal groups. Nothing worked. The raiders were too well organized. They knew the system too well. They had hidden bases in asteroid fields and abandoned space stations. Whenever Council forces attacked one base, the raiders would disappear and strike somewhere else. It was Elder Al who suggested asking the humans for help. "They are new to the Council," he said at the emergency meeting. "They want to prove themselves, and from what we have learned, their military might succeed where ours have failed." Commander disagreed. "We do not know enough about human capabilities. Sending them into a combat situation could be dangerous." "Dangerous for whom?" asked quietly. "For the humans or for us?" The room was silent. Ambassador Han stood slowly. His 4 eyes looked around at the assembled Council members. "We will ask the humans for assistance. We will request a small force, nothing large, just enough to observe their methods." "And if they succeed?" Kay asked. "Then we will have solved the problem." Han paused. "And we will understand our new allies better." "And if they fail?" Han did not answer. In his heart, he did not believe failure was possible, not after what he had seen in Sergeant Major Reed's eyes. The humans agreed to help immediately. They were almost eager. The human ambassador, a smiling woman named Director Hayes, said that Earth was happy to assist their new council friends. She said it would be good training for their soldiers. Good experience. Good experience. As if fighting a criminal army that had defeated every force sent against them was nothing more than a training exercise. The humans sent 300 soldiers, just 300. The council had expected thousands. Is this enough? Han asked when he reviewed the deployment orders. The raiders number in the tens of thousands. The human military liaison, a young officer named Captain Tors, smiled. 300 is plenty, Ambassador. We're sending a standard infantry battalion. They'll get the job done. A standard infantry battalion, Han repeated, not your special forces. Captain Tors laughed. It was a friendly sound, but it made Han uncomfortable. Special forces? No, Ambassador. For this mission, we're just sending regulars. The situation doesn't require anything more. The situation doesn't require anything more. The words echoed in Han's mind for days afterward. The human battalion arrived in the system 2 weeks later. Ambassador Han was there to observe, along with Commander and a small team of Council military analysts. They watched from a safe distance as the human transport ships entered orbit around Prime, the largest world in the system. The human commanding officer was a woman named Colonel Sarah Wright. She was tall and lean, with short gray hair and a face marked by old scars. She met with the council observers on the first day. "We've reviewed your intelligence reports," Colonel Wright said. She spoke in the same calm, direct way that Sergeant Major Reed had spoken months ago. "The Raider organization is larger than we expected. They have approximately 40,000 fighters across the system." Commander shifted nervously. "Colonel, you have only 300 soldiers. Perhaps we should request additional forces." "That won't be necessary," Wright interrupted. "We've identified their main base. It's in an asteroid field near the system's outer planet. Once we destroy it, the rest of the organization will collapse." "How can you be certain?" Han asked. Wright looked at him. Her eyes were the same as Reed's, calm, patient, utterly confident. Criminal organizations like this rely on leadership. Take out the leaders and the followers scatter. It's basic psychology. "But the asteroid field is heavily defended," said. "Our forces have tried to assault it 3 times. We lost hundreds of ships." Wright nodded. "You used frontal assaults, large fleets moving in open space. The raiders saw you coming from light minutes away." She touched a control panel, and a holographic map appeared in the air. "We're going to do something different." The map showed the asteroid field. Thousands of rocks floating in the darkness, ranging from small boulders to planetoid-sized mountains. Hidden among them were dozens of red markers indicating raider positions. "The raiders expect ships," Wright said. "They expect an attack from outside the asteroid field. They don't expect an attack from inside." Han studied the map. "I do not understand. How can you attack from inside? You would have to get your soldiers into the asteroid field without being detected." Wright smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "That's exactly what we're going to do." The operation began 3 days later. Ambassador Han watched from a command ship positioned far outside the asteroid field. The council observers had been given access to the human communication channels. They could hear everything that was happening. But for the first 12 hours, there was almost nothing to hear. The human soldiers had been deployed in small pods. Each pod held 10 soldiers. They had been launched toward the asteroid field from different angles, using nothing but their own momentum to drift through space. No engines, no power signatures, nothing for the raiders to detect. Just small metal containers drifting silently through the void. Commander was horrified. They're traveling through open space in those tiny containers. For 12 hours, the cold alone should kill them. Captain Torres, who was serving as the human liaison on the command ship, shook his head. The pods are insulated, and humans can survive in cold environments for extended periods. The soldiers have thermal suits. But 12 hours without moving, without communication, in complete darkness. Torres shrugged. They're trained for it. As Han watched the tactical display, he saw the tiny dots that represented human pods slowly entering the asteroid field. They spread out, each one heading toward a different raider position. Then the waiting continued. For another 6 hours, nothing happened. The human soldiers drifted deeper into the asteroid field. They passed within meters of raider patrol ships. They floated past defense platforms and sensor stations. And no one detected them. At hour 18, Colonel Wright's voice came over the communication channel. A single word. Execute. Then everything changed. The first explosion lit up the asteroid field like a small sun. A raider fuel depot, hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid, vanished in a ball of fire. Then another explosion, and another. Within minutes, a dozen raider positions were burning. The communication channels filled with panicked voices, raiders screaming for help, commanders demanding information, ships trying to launch without knowing where the attacks were coming from. And through it all, the human soldiers moved. Han watched the tactical display in amazement. The tiny blue dots that represented human squads were moving through the asteroid field like ghosts. They appeared, destroyed a target, and vanished again before the raiders could respond. How are they moving so fast? Demanded. The asteroids are kilometers apart. They cannot possibly cover that distance on foot. Captain Torres was watching the display with a small smile. They're not on foot, Commander. They're using thruster packs, short bursts of propulsion, then coasting in zero gravity. The soldiers train for years to master movement in environments like this. But the raiders have ships. They have thousands of fighters. Ships are a disadvantage in an asteroid field, Torres said. Too big, too easy to see, too hard to maneuver. Our soldiers are small and fast. They can hide behind any rock, change direction in an instant. The raiders can't hit what they can't find. A raider voice came over the captured communication channel. The alien was screaming in terror. They're inside the station. They're everywhere. Where did they come from? Where? The transmission cut off. Han felt his heart's pounding in his chest. He had 4 hearts like all. Right now, all 4 were racing. The battle lasted 8 hours. 8 hours of chaos. 8 hours of explosions and gunfire and terrified screams. 8 hours of human soldiers moving through the asteroid field like shadows, destroying everything the raiders had built over decades. When it was over, the raider organization no longer existed. Their main base was destroyed. Their leaders were dead. Their fleet was scattered. The survivors fled the system and never returned. And the humans lost 4 soldiers. 4 soldiers out of 300. Ambassador Han sat in the command ship for a long time after the battle ended. He stared at the tactical display, watching the blue dots that represented human squads slowly return to their transport ships. Commander was pale. His scales had turned almost white. He had not spoken a word in hours. Finally, Han turned to Captain Torres. This was a standard infantry battalion, he said slowly. Regular soldiers, not special forces. That's right, Ambassador. They destroyed an army of 40,000 with only 300 soldiers. Yes, sir. Han's 4 eyes closed. He felt tired and afraid. Captain, I need to ask you something. I need an honest answer. Of course, Ambassador. If the Council if we ever made a mistake, if we ever did something that made humanity angry, something that made you consider us enemies. Han opened his eyes and looked directly at the human officer. What would happen? Captain Torres was quiet for a moment. His expression was unreadable. "Ambassador," he said finally, "I hope we never have to find out." The report that Han sent to the council was classified at the highest level. Only the senior members were allowed to read it. It described the battle in detail. The planning, the infiltration, the precision attacks, the complete destruction of an enemy force that had defeated every council military sent against them. But the most important part of the report was the conclusion. "The humans sent regular soldiers," Han wrote, 300 standard infantry troops. They were not specialists. They were not elites. They were the equivalent of what we would consider basic military personnel. And they won a battle that should have been impossible to win. I have seen the reports about human special forces. I have read about their capabilities, but I did not truly understand what that meant until now. If regular human soldiers can do what I witnessed today, then their special forces are beyond anything the Council can imagine. My recommendation is clear. We must maintain our friendship with humanity at all costs. We must never give them a reason to fight against us. We must never, under any circumstances, make them our enemy. Because if we do, we will not survive." The Council read the report in silence. They discussed it in closed sessions. They debated and argued and worried. In the end, they all agreed with Han's conclusion. Humanity was welcomed as a full partner in the Council. They were given seats on every committee. They were invited to every meeting. They were treated with respect and admiration. And fear. Always fear. Because the Council had seen what regular human soldiers could do. They had watched 300 humans destroy an army of 40,000. They had seen the calm efficiency of soldiers who treated warfare as just another job. And they knew that somewhere out there, on that small blue planet called Earth, there were soldiers who made the regulars look ordinary. Special forces. The Council never asked about them directly. They never requested demonstrations or information. They were afraid of what they might learn. But they wondered. In the quiet moments, in the late nights, they wondered what kind of warriors could possibly be considered special among humans. What kind of soldiers could make Sergeant Major Reed look ordinary? What kind of fighters could be trusted with missions that even regular human soldiers could not complete? They wondered. And they were afraid. Because they knew that humanity's true strength had not yet been revealed. They knew that what they had seen was only a fraction of what humans could do. The regulars had made the Council tremble. The special forces were still waiting in the shadows. An ambassador Han prayed every night that they would never have to meet them. 2 years had passed since the battle in the system. 2 years of peace and prosperity. 2 years of humanity proving themselves to be excellent partners in the Galactic Council. But Ambassador Han could not forget what he had seen. Every night he dreamed of that asteroid field. He dreamed of 300 human soldiers moving through the darkness like ghosts. He dreamed of the screams that had filled the Raider communication channels. And he dreamed of the 4 soldiers who had died. Only 4 out of 300 against an army of 40,000. It should have been impossible. But humans had a strange relationship with the impossible. Han had spent the last 2 years studying humanity. He had read their history books. He had watched their entertainment programs. He had listened to their music and studied their art. And the more he learned, the more afraid he became. Human history was written in blood, century after century of warfare, nation against nation, brother against brother. They had invented weapons that could destroy cities in seconds. They had created poisons that could kill millions. They had developed technology specifically designed to cause suffering. And yet they had survived. Not just survived, they had thrived. They had turned their war-making abilities toward building a civilization that spanned their entire planet. They had taken the same energy that had driven them to kill each other and used it to reach for the stars. It was terrifying. It was also why Han had decided to learn more about their special forces. He knew he should not ask. He knew that some knowledge was dangerous, but he could not help himself. The question burned in his mind like a star. What kind of soldiers could be considered special among humans? He found his answer in an unexpected place. A young human diplomat named James had been assigned to the council station. He was the nephew of Sarah, the senior diplomat who had introduced Sergeant Major Reed at that first meeting years ago. James was friendly and open. He liked to talk about Earth, about human culture, about the things that made his species unique. Han found himself seeking out the young human's company more and more often. One evening, they sat together in the observation lounge. The stars spread out before them like scattered jewels. James was drinking something he called coffee, a dark liquid that humans seemed addicted to. "James," Han said carefully, "may I ask you something about your military?" The young diplomat smiled. "Of course, Ambassador, though I'm not a soldier myself, my knowledge is limited." "I understand, but perhaps you can help me understand something that has puzzled me for years." James set down his cup. His expression became more serious. "Is this about special forces?" Han's 4 eyes widened. "How did you know?" "Ambassador, every council member I've met eventually asks about them. It's like what's the expression? An elephant in the room. Everyone knows about them. Everyone is afraid of them, but no one wants to discuss them directly." "Then you understand my curiosity." James was quiet for a moment. He looked out at the stars. "Ambassador, I need to explain something about human culture. We have a concept called, well, there's no direct translation. We call it the tip of the spear." "I do not understand." "A spear is a weapon, a long pole with a sharp point. When you use a spear, only the tip actually touches the enemy. The rest of the spear, the shaft, the grip, provides support and power, but they never make contact." Han considered this. "You are saying that your regular soldiers are the shaft, and special forces are the tip." "In a way, regular soldiers are important. They're the foundation of our military. They hold territory, defend positions, and fight in open battles. Without them, we couldn't project power anywhere." James picked up his coffee again. "But special forces are different. They're designed for specific missions. Missions that regular soldiers can't complete." "What kind of missions?" James was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, more careful. "Ambassador, I'm going to tell you something that's not classified, but most humans don't talk about openly. It's considered uncomfortable." "I appreciate your honesty." Special forces exist to do the things that civilized societies don't want to acknowledge. They go places that regular soldiers can't go. They do things that regular soldiers can't do. And they do it without support, without backup, sometimes without anyone even knowing they were there. James looked directly at Han. His eyes were serious. No longer the cheerful young diplomat. Something harder lay beneath. There are special forces units that can live in the wilderness for months, surviving on nothing but what they find. There are units that can infiltrate any facility, any building, any ship. There are units that can hold a position against overwhelming odds for days until relief arrives or everyone dies. "Your regular soldiers are not capable of this?" Han asked. "Some might survive one of those missions, maybe, but special forces are trained specifically for impossible situations. They're selected from the best regular soldiers and then they're trained again, harder, longer, in ways that would break most people." James set down his coffee. His hands were steady, but Han noticed a slight tension in his shoulders. "The selection process alone kills some candidates, not from enemy action, from the training itself. Humans push their bodies so hard that sometimes they simply stop working. They die from training." Sometimes, not often, we try to prevent it, but Special Forces training is designed to find the limits of human endurance, and sometimes people discover their limits the hard way. Han felt cold. His four hearts were beating faster. What happens to those who survive the training? James smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. They become something else, something more than regular soldiers, something more than what most humans could ever be. Something more than human. No, Ambassador. Something completely human. Something that shows exactly what our species is capable of when we push ourselves to the absolute limit. The young diplomat stood. He walked to the window and looked out at the stars. My grandfather was Special Forces, he said quietly. Green Berets. He fought in 3 wars before he retired. He never talked about what he did. Not to my grandmother, not to my mother, not to anyone. But one night when I was young, I asked him what made Special Forces different from regular soldiers. I was curious like you. I wanted to understand. James turned to face Han. His face was pale in the starlight. He told me that regular soldiers fight wars. They follow orders, complete objectives, and come home. Special Forces don't fight wars. They fight in the spaces between wars, the dark places, the forgotten missions, the operations that never happened. He said that every Special Forces soldier carries a weight, the weight of knowing what they've done, the weight of secrets they can never share, the weight of being capable of things that most humans couldn't even imagine. Han's voice was barely a whisper. What things? James was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady. Ambassador, my grandfather was the gentlest man I ever knew. He taught me to fish. He helped me with my homework. He cried at my mother's wedding. And he also killed 73 people during his career, not in battle, one at a time, silently, in the dark, because that was his job. The observation lounge was silent. The stars burned cold and bright outside the window. Han did not know what to say. 73 people, one at a time. The young diplomat's grandfather, a gentle man who taught his grandson to fish, had ended 73 lives. And he was one soldier out of thousands. Ambassador, James said softly, do you understand now why we don't talk about Special Forces? Why the Council's fear is not just accepted but expected? Han nodded slowly. Regular soldiers are warriors. They fight and kill in battle, but they're still part of normal society. They come home, raise families, and live regular lives. Special Forces are different. They exist in a different space, a darker space. They're the ones who do the things that have to be done, the things that let regular people sleep safely at night. And they carry that weight forever. James returned to his seat. He picked up his coffee with hands that trembled slightly. My grandfather died 10 years ago, peaceful death, old age, but in his last days he told me something I've never forgotten. He said, the galaxy doesn't know about us yet. They've seen our regular soldiers and they're afraid. Good. That fear will keep them from doing anything stupid. But if they ever see what our Special Forces can do, if they ever push us far enough that we have to send them, then there won't be a galaxy left to be afraid. Han stared at the young diplomat. The words hung in the air between them like a death sentence. Your grandfather said that, a galaxy. He was exaggerating, probably, hopefully. James's smile was thin and unconvincing. But the principle is real. Special Forces exist for one purpose, to do what regular soldiers cannot do, and regular human soldiers can already do things that terrify the Council. So ask yourself, Ambassador, if our regulars can destroy armies of 40,000 with 300 soldiers, what can our Special Forces do? Han had no answer. After that night, the ambassador began to collect information about human Special Forces more seriously. He read records. He watched documentaries that humans had made about their own warriors. He listened to stories that human soldiers told each other in quiet moments. What he learned kept him awake at night. He learned about soldiers who could survive in frozen wastelands for weeks, melting snow for water, and eating raw meat to survive. He learned about swimmers who could stay underwater for hours using special equipment, infiltrating enemy ships and installations without ever being seen. He learned about warriors who could jump from aircraft at incredible heights, falling through the sky for minutes before opening their parachutes, landing silently behind enemy lines. He learned about soldiers trained to resist torture, not just endure it, resist it, to give false information under the most extreme pain, to protect their secrets even when their bodies were being destroyed. And he learned about the missions. Hostage rescues that seemed impossible, assassinations of heavily protected targets, sabotage operations behind enemy lines that changed the course of wars. One story in particular haunted him. During a human conflict long ago, a small team of Special Forces soldiers had been sent to destroy a communications facility. The team was compromised. They were surrounded by thousands of enemy soldiers. Escape was impossible. They held their position for 3 days. 3 days of constant fighting. 3 days without sleep, without food, without hope of rescue. They fought until their ammunition ran out. Then they fought with knives. Then they fought with their bare hands. When human reinforcements finally arrived, they found 2 survivors out of 12. Both were severely wounded. Both had continued fighting even after injuries that should have killed them. The enemy had lost over 500 soldiers. Han read that story 3 times. He could not believe it. 12 soldiers against thousands, 3 days of fighting, 500 enemy dead. And the humans did not consider this exceptional. They called it a difficult mission. They gave medals to the survivors and buried the dead with honor. Then they moved on to the next operation. Because for human special forces, the impossible was just another day at work. Ambassador Han requested a meeting with the full council. It was time to share what he had learned. The meeting room was full. Representatives from all 47 member species had gathered. They sat in their chairs, watching the ambassador with curious eyes. "Thank you for coming," Han said. His voice was steady, but inside he was trembling. "I have spent the last 2 years studying humanity. Specifically, I have been researching their military capabilities. I believe it is time to share my findings." He touched a control and a holographic display appeared above the table. It showed images of human soldiers in various environments: mountains, deserts, oceans, space. We all know about human regular soldiers. We have seen them in action. We know what they can do. The images changed. New soldiers appeared. These looked different, harder, more focused. Their eyes held something that made even the holographic images feel dangerous. These are human special forces. They represent the pinnacle of human military capability. Han began to explain. He talked about the selection process, the training, the missions. He shared stories and statistics and records. And as he spoke, he watched the council members' faces change. Commander Scales went from gray to white to almost transparent. Elder Al closed his eyes and seemed to age another century. Kay was shaking so badly that his chair rattled against the floor. When Han finished, the room was silent. Finally, En spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Ambassador, are you telling us that these Special Forces soldiers are real, that humans actually have warriors capable of these things?" "Yes." "And the regular soldiers we feared, the ones who destroyed the raiders, they are considered ordinary by human standards?" "Yes." "Then the Special Forces are." Han nodded slowly. The Special Forces are what humans become when they truly try, when they push themselves to the absolute limit of what their species can achieve. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Commander stood. His legs were unsteady. I move that we immediately increase all defensive measures at the borders of human space, not to threaten them, to protect ourselves in case we accidentally offend them." "Seconded," said Elder Al. "Thirded," said Kay. The vote was unanimous. As the council members filed out, Ambassador Han remained at his seat. He looked at the holographic images still floating above the table. Human Special Forces, the best of the best, the tip of the spear. And somewhere out there they were training, preparing, waiting for missions that regular soldiers could not complete. Han hoped the council would never give them a reason to come. Because now he understood something fundamental about humanity. Their regular soldiers were enough to make the galaxy tremble. Their special forces were enough to make the galaxy kneel. And if humanity ever truly went to war, if they ever unleashed everything they had, there would be nothing left to fight. Nothing at all. The distress signal reached the council station on a quiet morning. Ambassador Han was in his office, reviewing trade reports, when his communication device screamed with emergency alerts. Within minutes, he was rushing toward the council chamber. The room was chaos. Holographic displays showed tactical data from multiple sources. Council members were shouting over each other. Security officers ran back and forth with urgent reports. Elder Al stood at the center of it all, his ancient face grave. "Silence," he commanded. The room fell quiet. "Ambassador Han, thank you for coming. We have a crisis." "What happened?" Al gestured toward the main display. A star system appeared, one of the outer colonies. Han recognized it immediately. A world, his own people. "Has been invaded," Al said. "A fleet appeared 3 hours ago. Unknown origin, unknown species. They have blockaded the planet and begun landing ground forces." Han felt his heart stop. "Has a population of 8 million. How large is the invasion force?" Commander answered. His voice was grim. "Initial estimates suggest 200 warships in orbit. Ground forces number approximately 100,000. 100,000 soldiers," Han whispered, "against a civilian population with minimal defense forces." "The planetary militia numbers around 2,000, En said softly. "They will be overwhelmed within hours." "Who are the invaders? Where did they come from?" "We do not know," Al admitted. "The species matches no records in our database. They appeared from beyond the outer rim. They sent no communication, no demands. They simply attacked." Han's mind raced. His people, 8 million men, women, children, under attack by an unknown enemy. "What forces can we send?" he demanded. Checked his data pad. "The nearest council fleet is the 3rd Fleet, 18 warships. They can reach in 6 days. 6 days. The peacekeeping force is closer, 3 days, but they only have 12 ships, not enough to challenge 200 enemy vessels." Han felt despair wash over him. 6 days. His people would be slaughtered in 6 days. Then En spoke. "There is another option." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what she was going to say. "The humans have a patrol fleet near the border, 4 ships. They could reach in 18 hours. 4 ships against 200, shook his head. That is suicide. It is the only force that can arrive in time. Han looked at the display. Hung in space, surrounded by red markers indicating enemy vessels. His was dying, and the only hope was 4 human ships. "Contact the humans," he said. "Request immediate assistance." The human response came within minutes. Captain Maria Santos of the United Earth Defense Force appeared on the communication screen. She was young, barely 30 by human standards, with dark hair pulled back tightly and eyes that burned with intensity. "We received your distress call," she said. "My patrol group is already changing course for. We'll arrive in 17 hours. "Captain," Han said carefully, "the enemy has 200 warships. You have 4. We are not asking you to fight alone. We are asking you to protect the civilian population until reinforcements arrive." Santos smiled. It was not a comforting smile. "Ambassador, I understand the situation. My orders are clear. We will engage the enemy and protect until Council forces arrive." "Captain, the mathematics." "Ambassador," Santos interrupted gently, "my great-great-grandfather was at a place called Thermopylae. 300 soldiers against an army of hundreds of thousands. They held for 3 days. She paused. "I have 4 ships and 1,600 sailors. We'll hold for 6. The communication ended. Hans stared at the blank screen. 300 against hundreds of thousands. That was the story the young diplomat James had mentioned. A historical human battle where impossible odds had been faced in. And now this human captain was comparing her situation to that legend. 4 ships against 200. 1,600 humans against 100,000 enemy soldiers. It was madness. It was impossible. It was very, very human. The human patrol group arrived at 17 hours later, just as Captain Santos had promised. Ambassador Han watched from the council station, where live tactical feeds showed the battle in real time. The council had dedicated their best communication arrays to monitoring the situation. The 4 human ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. The enemy fleet immediately detected them. 200 warships turned to face 4. On the surface of the fighting had already begun. Enemy ground forces had landed in 3 major cities. The militia was fighting desperately, but they were losing ground by the hour. 8 million civilians huddled in shelters, waiting for rescue. Waiting for 4 human ships. Captain Santos's voice came over the communication channel. It was broadcast to the council station and to every receiver on the planet. "People of this is Captain Maria Santos of the United Earth Defense Force. Help is here. Hold on." Then she gave orders to her small fleet. "All ships execute battle plan Sierra. Break into pairs. 1 pair goes high, 1 pair goes low. We're going to split their fleet." Commander, watching from the council station, shook his head in disbelief. "She's attacking with 4 ships." "She's not attacking," En said quietly. "She's making them react." The human ships moved with shocking speed. They split into pairs and raced in opposite directions, curving around the planet at angles that seemed to defy physics. The enemy fleet hesitated. Then they split as well, sending ships to intercept each human pair. And that was when things became interesting. The human ships were small destroyers by human standards. Each carried minimal weapons compared to the massive enemy warships, but they were fast, incredibly fast, and they were piloted by humans. Captain Santos's ship danced through enemy fire like it was made of light. She dodged missiles that should have been unavoidable. She slipped through gaps in the enemy formation that should not have existed. And every time she moved, she drew more enemy ships away from the planet. "What is she doing?" demanded. "She cannot defeat them. Why is she fighting?" "She's not trying to defeat them," Han said slowly. Understanding dawned in his mind. "She's trying to buy time." Every enemy ship chasing Santos was a ship not bombing the planet. Every missile fired at the human destroyers was a missile not killing civilians. Every moment the enemy fleet was distracted was a moment the militia could regroup. The battle lasted 3 hours. 3 hours of impossible maneuvers. 3 hours of human ships dancing through walls of fire. 3 hours of Captain Santos taunting the enemy, drawing them further and further from the planet. 1 human ship was destroyed, then another. But they kept fighting. When the first human ship died, the crew managed to ram their crippled vessel into an enemy warship. Both ships vanished in a ball of fire. When the second ship died, the captain broadcast a message that echoed across all frequencies. "Give them hell, Santos." Then his ship exploded. And still Santos fought. 2 ships against 198. The enemy commander must have been enraged by now. The human ships were gnats, tiny, annoying, impossible to catch. They could not harm the massive fleet, but they would not stop moving. Santos kept them focused on her. She kept them angry. She kept them chasing. And she bought time. On the surface, something changed. The enemy ground forces had been advancing steadily through the cities, but suddenly their advance slowed. Then it stopped. The first reports were confusing. Enemy soldiers were falling. Not from militia fire. There was no one in position to make those shots. But soldiers kept dying. One by one, silently, without warning. Commander studied the reports with growing horror. What is happening? Who is killing them? Han felt a chill run down his spine. He remembered something James had told him, something his grandfather had said. 73 people, one at a time, silently in the dark. The humans, Han whispered. There were more than ships. He was right. When Captain Santos had dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, her ships had not been alone. Attached to their hulls, hidden from sensors, were small pods, insertion pods. Each one carried 10 soldiers. Human soldiers. Not regular soldiers. Special forces. 160 human special forces operators had ridden those ships too. They had separated from the destroyers before the battle began. They had drifted silently toward the planet, invisible against the darkness of space. And while Santos drew the enemy fleet away, they had landed. Now they were inside the enemy lines, inside the cities, moving through the chaos like ghosts. And they were killing. The enemy ground forces numbered 100,000. The human special forces numbered 160. It should not have been a contest. It was not. The special forces did not fight the enemy army directly. They did not need to. Instead, they targeted leadership. They destroyed communication relays. They sabotaged equipment. They killed officers and destroyed command posts. Within hours, the enemy ground forces began to fall apart. Without orders, without communication, without leadership, the invaders became a confused mob. They stopped advancing. They started fighting among themselves. Some units simply abandoned their positions and fled. And the human special forces kept hunting. On the orbital battle, Santos's luck finally ran out. Her last remaining ship took a direct hit from an enemy weapons platform. The vessel began to break apart. Emergency systems screamed warnings across all channels. But Santos did not try to escape. "All hands, this is the captain." Her voice was calm, impossibly calm. "It's been an honor. Now let's give them something to remember." She aimed her dying ship at the enemy command vessel. The enemy commander had exactly 14 seconds to understand what was happening before Santos's destroyer slammed into his flagship at full speed. The explosion was visible from the surface of. And then reinforcements arrived. The Third Fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel exactly 6 days after the initial distress call. 18 warships armed and ready for battle. But the battle was already over. The enemy fleet was in chaos. Their command structure had been destroyed when Santos killed their flagship. Without leadership, they scattered. The ships hunted them down one by one. On the surface, the militia had regrouped. With the enemy ground forces in disarray, they began to push back. Within days, the invasion was broken. 8 million survived. Because of 4 human ships and 160 Special Forces soldiers. Ambassador Han stood at the viewing window of the council station. Below him, turned slowly in space. His people. Saved. Anne stood beside him. Her silver skin was dim, a sign of exhaustion among her species. "The final count is in," she said softly. "All 4 human ships were destroyed. All 1,600 sailors died. Of the 160 Special Forces soldiers, 87 survived. Han closed his 4 eyes. 1,600 humans had died to save 8 million of his people. The enemy lost 104 warships and over 40,000 ground soldiers, and continued. Most of the ground forces were killed by the Special Forces teams. 40,000 soldiers killed by 160 humans. 40,000, Han repeated. The number was beyond comprehension. Ambassador, I must tell you something. N's voice was strange, hesitant. I reviewed the Special Forces mission reports. The ones that survived submitted detailed accounts of their operations. And they listed their actions as routine, standard infiltration and disruption tactics, nothing exceptional. Han opened his eyes. He turned to look at his colleague. Nothing exceptional. Those were their words. They said the mission was challenging but within normal parameters. They recommended some minor tactical adjustments for future operations. They killed 40,000 enemy soldiers. They saved a planet, and they called it routine. Anne nodded slowly. Her silver skin rippled with unease. Han turned back to the window. He stared at it for a long time. Finally, he spoke. When I first met Sergeant Major Reed, he told me that he was nothing special, just regular infantry. And when I asked what Special Forces could do, he said I did not want to know. He was right. Han placed one hand against the cold glass of the window. 1,600 humans died to save my people. They did not hesitate. They did not bargain. They simply came and fought until they were dead. And the Special Forces, 160 soldiers against 100,000, they called their mission routine. What are these creatures, and what kind of species produces warriors like this? The ambassador was quiet for a long moment. I do not know, she finally admitted, but I am grateful they chose to be our friends. Han nodded slowly. As am I, as am I. The council held a memorial service for the fallen humans. Every member species attended. Even species that had never met a human came to pay respects. Captain Maria Santos was awarded the council's highest honor. Her name was inscribed on the memorial wall at the center of the station, alongside the greatest heroes in galactic history. The Special Forces soldiers who survived were offered honors as well. They refused. We don't fight for medals, one of them said, a quiet man with gray eyes and a face marked by old scars. We fight because it needs to be done. Han watched the ceremony from the back of the room. He watched the human soldiers stand in silence, their faces unreadable. He watched them accept condolences with simple nods and brief words. And he understood something important. The council had feared the regulars. They had trembled at the thought of what Special Forces could do. But they had missed the most important thing. Humans did not fight for conquest. They did not fight for glory. They did not fight because they enjoyed killing. They fought for each other. 1,600 sailors had died to buy time for 160 soldiers. Those soldiers had fought against impossible odds to save 8 million people they had never met. That was humanity's true power. Not their weapons, not their training, not their impossible endurance. Their willingness to sacrifice everything for others. Ambassador Han left the memorial service with new understanding. Humanity was not just a species of warriors. They were a species of protectors, guardians, defenders of those who could not defend themselves. And if the galaxy ever faced a true threat, an enemy that endangered all life, humanity would be there. They would fight. They would die. And they would never, ever give up. That was what made them special. That was what made them human. 5 years after the Battle of, Ambassador Han received an unusual invitation. The message came directly from Earth's military headquarters. It was addressed to him personally, along with several other senior council members. The message was simple. You are invited to observe a joint training exercise between Council forces and the United Earth Defense Force. This will include a demonstration of various human military capabilities. We believe this will strengthen the bonds between humanity and the Council. Han read the message 3 times. A demonstration of human military capabilities. After everything the Council had seen, after all the reports and battles and impossible victories, the humans wanted to show them more. Part of him wanted to refuse. He had seen enough. He understood enough. The fear that lived in his hearts was already deep and permanent. But another part of him, the part that had driven him to study humanity for years, wanted to know more, needed to know more. He accepted the invitation. The exercise was held on a moon called Base, near Earth's solar system. It was a barren world, covered in gray dust and ancient craters. The humans had built a military training facility there, one of their largest. Han traveled to the base along with Commander, Elder Al, and N. They were greeted by a human general named Michael Tors, the father of Captain Tors, who had served as liaison during the operation years ago. General Tors was old for a human. His hair was white, and his face was lined with age. But his eyes were still sharp, and he moved with the confident grace of a lifelong warrior. "Welcome to base," he said. "We're honored that the Council has accepted our invitation. We hope this exercise will help you understand humanity better." "We are grateful for the opportunity," Han replied carefully. "Though I must confess some nervousness. We have already seen much of human military capability." Tors smiled. It was a knowing smile. "Ambassador, you've seen humans fight. Today you'll see how we prepare to fight. There's a difference." The exercise began the next morning. The Council observers were taken to a viewing platform overlooking a massive training area. Below them, thousands of human soldiers were engaged in various activities. Some practiced hand-to-hand combat. Others ran obstacle courses that would have killed most species. Others fired weapons at distant targets with terrifying accuracy. "These are regular soldiers," Tors explained. "Infantry mostly. They're in the middle of their advanced training cycle." Commander watched a group of humans climb a vertical wall using only their hands. "They make it look easy." "It's not. That wall is 30 meters high. If they fall, they'll break bones, maybe die." "Then why do they do it?" "Because someday they might need to climb something similar in combat. Better to learn here, where we can help them if they fail, than in the field where failure means death." The observation continued. Han watched humans swim through freezing water, crawl through mud under live fire, and march for hours under heavy loads. He watched them practice urban combat in mock cities built specifically for training. He watched them learn to treat wounds on their own bodies while still fighting. "This is regular training," Elder Al asked. His voice was weak. "For normal soldiers." "This is the basics," Tors confirmed. "The foundation. Every human soldier goes through something like this." After 3 hours of watching regular soldiers train, the Council observers were exhausted just from viewing. They could not imagine actually doing what they had seen. Then Tors led them to a different area. This section of the base was isolated from the rest. High walls surrounded it. Guards stood at every entrance. The security was intense, far more than anywhere else on the base. "Beyond this point," Tors said quietly, "you will see things that we do not normally share with outsiders. I must ask for your word that what you witness will remain confidential." The Council members agreed. The doors opened. The training area inside was different from the others. It was smaller, more compact, and the soldiers training there moved differently than the regular troops. Han could not explain what he was seeing at first. The soldiers looked human. They were dressed in simple training clothes. They were engaged in exercises similar to what the regular soldiers had been doing. But something was wrong. It took him several minutes to understand. The regular soldiers had been impressive. They had moved with skill and determination, but they had also shown signs of effort, strain on their faces, sweat on their bodies, occasional stumbles or mistakes. These soldiers showed none of that. They moved like machines, perfect form, perfect timing, no wasted motion, no visible effort. A soldier would run through an obstacle course that had challenged regular troops for minutes and complete it in seconds without breathing hard. Another soldier practiced hand-to-hand combat against 3 opponents simultaneously. He defeated all 3 in under 10 seconds, moving so fast that Han's 4 eyes could barely track him. A third soldier hung from a bar by one hand, doing pull-ups with a weight attached to his body. He did not count. He did not strain. He simply moved up and down, like a machine designed for exactly that purpose. "These are Special Forces candidates," Torres said softly. "They have passed initial selection. They are now in advanced training." "Candidates?" N's voice was barely a whisper. "They are not finished training yet." "No, this is month 8 of a 24-month program. If they pass all requirements, they will become full operators." Commander made a strangled sound. What requirements remain? What else could possibly be left to teach them? Torres did not answer immediately. He watched the training with an expression that Han could not read. "The physical part is almost complete," he finally said. "The remaining 16 months focus on other skills: infiltration, intelligence, languages, technology, psychology." Psychology. Special Forces must understand their enemies. They must predict how targets will think, how they will react. They must be able to manipulate, deceive, and control. A Special Forces operator is not just a warrior, they are a weapon in human form. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Han watched a candidate practice knife work against a training dummy. The blade moved so fast it was invisible. The dummy was destroyed in seconds. "General Torres," Han said carefully, "may I ask you something?" "Of course, Ambassador." "Sergeant Major Reed told me years ago that I did not want to know what Special Forces could do. I have spent years learning about them anyway. I have read reports and studied missions and tried to understand. But I realize now that I have never actually seen them operate. Not truly. The Battle of was seen only through sensors and reports. I never witnessed Special Forces in action with my own eyes." Torres was quiet for a long moment. "And you want to?" I need to understand completely. The Council needs to understand." The general studied the ambassador for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. "Follow me." They walked deeper into the training facility, past more guards, through more security doors, into an area that felt different, heavier, somehow, as if the air itself was more serious. "This is where we conduct final evaluations," Torres explained. "Realistic scenarios that test everything a candidate has learned. You are about to see the final exercise for a graduating class." The council observers were led to another viewing platform. Below them was a mock-up of an urban environment, buildings, streets, vehicles. It looked like a small city. In the center of the city, surrounded by armed guards, was a group of hostages. They were dummies, Han realized. Training tools shaped like various council species. "The scenario is simple," Torres said. "Terrorists have taken hostages from multiple species. They are heavily armed and willing to kill. The candidates must rescue the hostages without losing more than 10%. "How many hostages?" asked. 40. "How many candidates?" 6. 6 against how many terrorists? Torres pointed at the streets below. Armed figures were everywhere, on rooftops, in doorways, behind windows, moving through the streets in patrol patterns. 100. Commander Scales went completely white. 6 against 100. In an urban environment with hostages, that is impossible. Torres smiled slightly. For most species, yes. An alarm sounded. The exercise began. For the first 30 seconds, nothing seemed to happen. The terrorists continued their patrols. The hostages remained in place. The city was quiet. Then simultaneously, three things occurred. A terrorist on a rooftop fell over without a sound. A patrol on the street corner collapsed as if their strings had been cut, and the lights in one building went dark. The council observers did not see the special forces candidates. They were invisible, ghosts moving through the city like shadows. More terrorists fell, silently, quickly. One moment they were alive and alert. The next they were on the ground, motionless. The remaining terrorists began to panic. They shouted warnings. They fired weapons at shadows. They ran through the streets, searching for enemies they could not see. 3 minutes into the exercise, 30 terrorists were down. The candidates had not been spotted once. 4 minutes in, the remaining terrorists realized they were being hunted. They retreated toward the hostages, planning to use them as shields. They never made it. The candidates appeared from nowhere. 6 human soldiers materialized in the street like demons summoned from darkness. They moved faster than Han's eyes could follow. The fight lasted 11 seconds. When it was over, 64 more terrorists were on the ground. The candidates had taken no injuries, not a scratch. The hostages were freed. Not a single one was harmed. 6 soldiers against 100 terrorists, 100% success rate. The alarm sounded again. The exercise was complete. Han realized he had stopped breathing. His 4 hearts were pounding so hard that his chest ached. Beside him, Commander had fallen to his knees. Elder Al was weeping silently. N's silver skin had gone completely dull. That, Torres said quietly, is what special forces can do. The council observers remained at base for 2 more days. They watched more training. They spoke with more soldiers. They tried to understand what they had witnessed. On the final evening, General Torres invited Han to his office for a private conversation. Ambassador, Torres said, I know you have many questions. I will answer what I can. Han was silent for a long moment. His mind was still processing everything he had seen. General, he finally said, I have spent years being afraid of humanity, afraid of your regular soldiers, terrified of your special forces. I have had nightmares about what you could do if you ever became our enemy. I understand. But I realize now that I was afraid of the wrong thing. Torres raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I was afraid of your power, your weapons, your warriors. But after seeing your training, after watching your soldiers prepare for battle, I understand something new. Han leaned forward. You do not train to conquer. You do not prepare to dominate. Every exercise I saw was about protection, rescue, defense. Your soldiers learn to kill, yes, but they learn to kill so that others may live. The Special Forces exercise. 6 soldiers against 100 enemies. They could have simply killed everyone, but instead they focused on the hostages. They made sure not a single innocent was harmed. That is not the mindset of conquerors. That is the mindset of protectors. Torres was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. Ambassador, humanity has a complicated history with war. We have done terrible things to each other, things that would shock the Council if they knew the full truth. But we have also learned from those mistakes. We have come to understand that true strength is not about destroying your enemies. It is about protecting what matters. Our soldiers are weapons, powerful weapons, but we have learned to point those weapons at threats, not at innocents. We have learned that being strong means having the power to destroy and choosing not to. That is what we train for. That is what we prepare for. The day when we must fight, not to conquer, but to protect. Han nodded slowly. The fear in his heart was still there. It would always be there, but now it was joined by something else. Respect. trust, and perhaps even hope. The council delegation returned to the station a week later. They presented their report to the full assembly. Han spoke for 2 hours. He described everything he had seen: the regular soldiers, the training, the special forces candidates, the exercise. When he finished, the council chamber was silent. Finally, Elder Al spoke. "Ambassador Han, what is your recommendation?" Han stood tall. His 4 eyes looked around at the assembled representatives of 47 species. "My recommendation is simple. We should stop being afraid of humanity." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. "I do not mean we should forget what they are capable of. We should never forget. Humanity has the power to destroy us all. Their regular soldiers can defeat armies. Their special forces can eliminate threats that would overwhelm any other species. But we should remember why they have this power: not to conquer, not to dominate, but to protect. Humanity has proven themselves again and again. They destroyed a criminal empire that threatened our trade routes. They sacrificed their lives to save 8 million of my people. In countless small ways, they have shown that they stand with the council, not against it. They called their special forces special because they can do things other soldiers cannot. But I believe they are special for a different reason. They represent the best of what humanity can be: strong enough to destroy, but wise enough to protect instead. We should not fear humanity. We should be grateful that they chose to be our friends, and we should work to ensure that friendship lasts forever." The vote was unanimous. Humanity was officially recognized as a full partner in the Galactic Council, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. Human ambassadors were given permanent seats on every committee. Human ships were integrated into Council defense fleets. Human soldiers trained alongside warriors from a dozen species. And the fear that had once dominated the Council's perception of humanity slowly transformed into something else: respect, admiration, and in time, genuine friendship. Years later, when Han was old and near the end of his life, he was asked to speak at the anniversary celebration of humanity's joining the Council. He stood before representatives from hundreds of species, far more than the original 47, as the Council had grown under human partnership. "When I first met humanity," he said, his voice strong despite his age, "I was terrified. I met a soldier named Reed who told me he was nothing special, just regular infantry. I spent years learning that what humans consider regular would be exceptional by any other standard. I spent years understanding that their special forces were beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. But I also learned something more important. I learned that humanity's true strength is not in their weapons or their training. It is in their hearts. They fight not because they love war, but because they love peace. They kill not because they enjoy death, but because they want to protect life. They sacrifice themselves not for glory, but for others. That is what makes humanity special. That is why they are the greatest allies the Council has ever known. And that is why I am proud to call them friends." The chamber erupted in applause. Human delegates stood side by side with Council members from 100 different species. They cheered and clapped and celebrated the friendship that had transformed the galaxy. In the back of the chamber, unnoticed by most, a small group of human soldiers watched the celebration. They wore simple uniforms with no medals or decorations. Their faces were calm and patient. Their eyes missed nothing. Special forces, watching, protecting, ready. Because that was what they did. That was what they had always done. And that was what they would continue to do as long as the galaxy needed them. The humans called them special forces. The Council had once feared them. Now they simply trusted them. And that trust, built on years of sacrifice and protection and friendship, was the strongest force in the galaxy. Stronger than any weapon. Stronger than any army. stronger than fear itself. That was humanity's true gift to the stars. Not destruction, protection, and a promise that as long as humans drew breath, they would stand between the innocent and the darkness. Always, forever, without hesitation, without fear, because that was what it meant to be human. That was what it meant to be special.